Um, so any questions about, we're going to talk a lot more about these, but just trying to you guys start to get an understanding of how the scenarios work. Okay, well, let's go ahead and start creating a new year, because it'll take anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes to create. And while that's doing it on your guys' machines, we can keep talking about Scenario Explorer, but we should at least get the process started. So the way you create a new year scenario, and I'm not going to create one on Reynolds. Darren, I'm not going to create one for you guys. You guys can do it. I'm on your production anyway.
Okay.
But I did create one on my test. Well, first of all, you can only create a scenario, a New Year scenario, from one that has the status changed to adopted, right? Because you want to be able, when you create a New Year scenario, all of your assumptions, all of your rates and your benefit plans and all of the stuff here on the assumptions, that will carry forward into your New Year scenario. All your supplemental pay that you've set up, all of your calculations, because normally that's going to be your most updated scenario, and that's going to be kind of your starting point. Now, not your employees and not your financials, and your salary plans, that's all going to reload new from your ERP. But your assumptions, they will carry forward into the New Year scenario. So that's why you have to have that's Reynolds again. I'm just going to close that. I don't want to accidentally click on that. Let me just move this. All of your assumptions will carry forward, and that's why you have to, sorry, I must have closed it. That's why you have to use an adopted scenario to create your new year from. So when you're ready to create a new year, now before we do this, is everybody understand what we're doing and why we're doing it? And if you're in production, that's fine, because we're going to delete this at the end of training, and then you can recreate a new one to actually work in. But if you're in test, you can create it, but you don't have to worry about deleting it when we're done. So does everyone have an adopted in their 22-23 fiscal year? Does anybody not have an adopted? Okay. So you right click, go to create scenario, and new year scenario, and it's going to be the 23-24 scenario. And we'll talk about these other ones in a minute, but just right now, let's get this process started. So click on new year scenario. And then there's a form that's going to pop up, and we'll talk about the options. So is everybody to this point? You had this form that popped up after you selected it?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay. So now everybody knows, or maybe you know, in your ERP, or like in Visions or Business Plus, you have a database, an IV database or a Business Plus database. And ESP does its best to look to see which one is the current one. But you can use this pull down menu, and you should see, hopefully these look somewhat familiar to you. You should see a list of your, usually it's broken out by fiscal year databases. And by default, we try to find the one that's the year, the current year, and that will be the default. The little asterisk means default. So if you see default here and you're not sure what the default is, just click, and if you see the asterisk, so this is good. This is what I would expect to see, the 22-23 fiscal year. That's where it's going to go and pull the data from because it's going to reload the employees and it's going to reload the working and the adopted. But it's going to reload the working and copy the working into the financials, into the model on the financials tab. So make sure that's set. That's probably the most important one. If you do change it to a different one, you have to click set that as the default, and then that one will become the default. More than likely, you won't want to do that if the right one is already selected. And it won't hurt to leave it checked if it's the right one anyway. So you have these two options of keeping the model data. So if you've been in ESP and you've been keeping it up to date, the model I'm talking about, as things happen, you could copy your model data into the new year. I would say almost no district does that. Once the year is done, they kind of put ESP away for a while until it's time to create the new year. So in that case, you're going to want to not check these and get a fresh snapshot of what's in Visions or Business Plus, bring that into ESP, and that's going to be your starting point. So for most of you, you will not want to check either one of these. But if you did, for some reason, we did have somebody a couple of years ago, they had created a bunch of budgeted positions in ESP, and they did not exist in Visions. So they clicked this, and it would keep just the budgeted and vacant positions and bring those into the next year's model. So that's there if you need it. Annualize, we talked about that yesterday. You probably do want to select this. And what this will do, any of those mid-year hires that have been hired mid-year this year, it will change their work days to match their work calendar work days so that you're budgeting them for a full year next year. So we talked about that yesterday. If you have any questions about annualizing, let me know. And then just open scenario after creating, check that, and then click create. Any questions? Is everyone able to do this? Anyone not able to do this?
I'm just still spinning.
Right. Scott's working with someone else right now. I don't know why you would be spinning. Too much to drink, maybe. Bad joke.
Could be.
And then Tim, for the note, because it's wanting me to put something in here.
Oh yeah, just say creating new year. Those kind of notes you'll probably never see again. I mean, they're not really that important, but you do. It is required that you do it. But just like creating new year, that's all you're doing. Now I'm going to cancel because I already this morning created a new year scenario here. And you guys should see the exact same thing after yours creates. Like I said, it could take anywhere from 5 to even 15 minutes. Reynolds, yours might take a long time. You guys have a big database. But as long as you have that process log up and it's moving, you should be fine.
Yeah, it's moving.
Okay. All right, good. Something else I wanted to show you guys here on Scenario Explorer is the daily. Well, actually, let me bring up Reynolds back because theirs is actually up to date. So here's Reynolds Scenario Explorer, and this is the daily. Remember, we talked about the actuals that upload on that get refreshed on a daily basis. The way ESP works is we copy those into this. This is actually a scenario. They get loaded into this scenario and then copied into each of these scenarios. And there's always a twist. If you scroll to the right here in Scenario Explorer, there is a daily update checkbox. So this, whatever has these checked, the daily values will get copied into the scenarios. By default, I think they're on, but after a year, I think we turn these off just because there's no need to waste the processing power really of updating old scenarios with the dailies. But if you ever not have the dailies or you not have actuals, come here first and check this. And don't forget, you should always, if you question the dailies, if you go down here to this download button, this little download icon, Infinite Visions Daily, it was ran on December 6th at 1:53 this morning. So I know that these actuals in the purple over here, financials, the actuals in the purple columns were as of 1:53 this morning. You have the amount, anything that's been encumbered for the total amount. And if a change is made to the actuals and you need to bring those in to ESP, if you can't wait till the next day, you can always right click and say reload snapshot. If you right click on the daily, reload, it's called a snapshot. It will go and reload and refresh everything as of that time. That's if you're down to the wire and you need the actuals to reflect something. You can do that. Speaking of that, we also have in the current year actuals, we have a adjustment. So if you're printing your documents, let me take out the summing because I can't make any adjustments. I'm not going to make any adjustments anyway, but you can't have any adjustments with your summing. To make adjustments, you have to be full scope. It means no summing. But let's say you're printing your documents and you know that this number is not correct. Something's been done and it's just not being reflected in ESP. You can, this scenario is locked, so I cannot, but you can add the adjustment column and change it so that when you print your documents, your budget documents, this number will be the right number. That's just a last minute. If something needs to change at the last second and you don't have time to reload, you can change these, just your current year actuals, not the prior year actuals, just the current year actuals. Also, in Scenario Explorer, is everybody with me? Good to go? Natalie, I see you had a question. Did you have a question? Guess not. Okay. Well, I got Scott here to help. Scott, Beth, Scott's still working with somebody else right now.
Oh, okay.
No,
Yeah,
no
I
problem.
asked Scott to help me create a new scenario.
Oh, okay. He's helping you right now?
No, not quite yet.
Not yet. Okay. All right. What did you have a question about, Natalie? Maybe I can help answer it.
Sure. I just need some help creating a new scenario.
Right. Was it that you don't see the adopted, or when you right click, did you not see it, the new year?
When I right clicked, I tried to create a new scenario, but I'm not sure if anything is happening on my screen.
I see. Okay. Okay. All right. We'll get Scott to give you a hand as soon as he is free. You can see here on Reynolds, I can tell Darren is making one because it will say incomplete until it's finished. And it does take a little while to open. Sorry, I know I got a lot of windows going here. Back to Scenario Explorer. Not only do you have the daily that we talked about, but we take a monthly snapshot. And November's will be here. It happens on the 10th because a lot of times stuff gets put in late. So we put it to the 10th. So on the 10th of December, November's will show up here. So if you ever need to look at a monthly, you could we'll get to this later in the week. You could open these scenarios and like lay them side by side and see the change that's happening monthly in your actuals. And then we also have a yearly. And when you're creating your budget documents, this will be the scenario that it pulls from for your prior years. But this annual here, this 21-22 annual comes from, or I should say, this 2021 actuals comes from that scenario. So all of these actuals actually point back to either the daily or the prior year scenarios in Scenario Explorer. And then you can see Reynolds, they went way back. I think 1 year, yeah, here it is. Okay. Darren, I just want to show people this. So look here in 2017-18, how many scenarios they made. I think this wins the record for the most I've ever seen. Which is fine, right? Because that's the whole point. You know, they created number 8 here and they said, well, wait a minute, what if this happens? So then they preserved number 8, created a new modeling, and then they made the change to see what the effect of the change is. You see 10 days reduction, FTE reduction, worksheet, I don't know. But, it's really up to you how many scenarios you want to use in a fiscal year. It doesn't hurt anything to create them. The only problem is it just adds complications to it. And if you go back to one, like if they went back to number 4 here, it would not have any of the changes that these had in it. So it's important to remember that they are independent of each other.
Mutually exclusive?
Mutually exclusive, right. The only relationship is 6 was a copy of 5. Once it's created, though, the chain is broke and there's no connection between the two. That's why it's important to put like stepping in COLAs. That's a good example. Some districts, they go ahead and step and apply COLAs in the number 1 scenario because they know everybody's going to step and have COLAs and all of these other scenarios. So why not go ahead and just do it once here, and then it will propagate as these scenarios are created. All the employees will already be stepped and COLA'd. Some districts, they don't do anything. They just kind of get all the factors in number 1. Then before the stepping and the COLAs, they create a new scenario.
Tim, can I ask a question to the group?
Yep.
Since I'm a newbie to a school district. So in terms of the employees and their steps and all that information, so as a group, do you guys just meet with your HR, HCM, whatever you guys call them, and meet with individuals and then go over the employees to make sure that you have the correct information? What's the process? I'm curious about what the process is, or what people have done to get that information. Does it make sense? Anybody?
Anybody? No? I don't know.
All right, no worries. I'll figure it out. I mean, once Anthony gets back and I have other resources, I just didn't know whether I should start planning meetings, right, with HCM so I can go through this stuff, or do I send an email just saying, hey, can you send me this employee information, knowing that there's PII there? I guess that's why I'm trying to figure out a
Right.
process.
Right. Yeah, and I've never worked in the business office, so I'm not really sure how the information comes in. And a lot of times, I know even like negotiations are still going on. So even if you're in 23, 24, you can't really put the COLAs in yet because you're
Right.
not really sure what they're going to settle on. The good thing about, and we haven't done this yet, COLAs and stepping, it's very easy to change. If you give them a 3% and then it changes to 4%, all you do is change the 3 to a 4, and it will take away the 3 and then add the 4. That's an important concept to understand about ESP is we always take away any of the factors and bring the numbers back to their original numbers, and then we reapply COLAs and steps and inflation factors and any other factors.
For mine, it says incomplete. So it looks like mine is finished.
No, do you see the process log? If you don't see the process log, you can, if you click on this toolbar button here, it's here in Scenario Explorer, or it's here in the main toolbar. That should open, and you should see it still running. It's probably still running.
Okay.
If you open up,
It's-
yeah.
Oh, I was just saying, this is Cynthia. I didn't catch his full question. What were you asking about?
Oh, Cynthia, what I was asking is that I'm new to my position. So we all know, right, that a lot of the modeling and a lot of the employee salaries make up a lot of what we're doing. So in terms of steps and all that kind of stuff, I was curious how other people at other school districts go about getting this information. Do you meet with HCM or human resources, and that's who's giving you this information? Do you send them an email? I was just curious about what you guys do individually as a process.
Yeah, for like our steps and stuff that would come from HR. We normally, like our cabinet team, so all of our executive directors, they meet and then they'll give us that information from HR, and then we'll finalize it once the negotiations are done.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, I know some districts, they bring ESP with them on their laptop for negotiations because they can quickly see the difference between a 3.5 and a 3.8 COLA. I haven't shown you guys how to do this yet, but you can save a baseline. You can save a copy of your model and then go and add a COLA. And then you can put your new model next to the baseline, the copy. You can see the exact dollar cost of that change. But we'll get to that probably tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, Darren, if you refresh, I see yours is finished now. If you refresh Scenario, it should open anyway in your main grid. So everybody should, after it's finished, you should see 2023, 24, number 1 modeling fiscal base here. And in Scenario Explorer, you should see a new fiscal year, 2024, with the scenario you just created right here. Does anybody not have that? Or maybe it's still creating?
So I can get out of my log. You're saying if I hit control and then the minus button to collapse it.
We should be at the very top in Scenario Explorer, and it should have auto opened in your grid, in the main grid, because you had that checkbox open after creation checked. So let's talk about a new year scenario. Go to your financials. So here's a case where I went to my financials and it's completely collapsed. So I'll hold the control key plus, and it expands. Again, I only have 2 levels, so it doesn't matter. But when this scenario was created, this is the working now. So now I'm in 2023, 24. So you got to kind of put your mind in, now we're in the current year. I was working in last year's, but now I'm in the current year. So these working dollars, a working budget was brought into ESP, and then it was copied into the model. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys a trick. You can grab columns, click and hold, and move it to the left, because I'm going to compare these 2 columns to each other. And then I'm going to add what we call a delta column. And I want the delta column on the right side, right? It's going to tell me the delta between these 2 columns. So you just left click to select the right column. And you go to this toolbar button right here. You can see that. Click it. Oh, I did it twice. And it puts in a delta column. Now you will have deltas in all of the salaries right now, because you got to remember in ESP, we do roll-ups, we do we apply all of these assumptions with our own factors in there. So they're never going to match too much, too close. Whereas, and then this is where the employees really are, right? Because these numbers are coming, the model numbers are coming from the employees, and employees are freshly loaded from Visions or Business Plus. Whereas the blue working, this is where you budgeted the money. There's no tie. Sorry, just one second. Beth, I'm going to get Scott to help you. Beth, could you start Team Viewer for Scott, if you can, please?
Will do.
All right. So you have to remember that this working, that's just where dollars were budgeted, right? They're not tied to real people or real FTE. Whereas the green currently is, because we just reloaded the employees, and there's 41 million of employees in 0111 right now. So that's why you're going to see a lot of deltas between the salary stuff. But as you get past the salaries and you start looking at these budget items, they match exactly. Because we copied, let's look at a fairly small one here, maybe 0610. I'm going to put 0610. I want to look at each individual budget item. So I'm going to put 0610 in my scope. And I'm going to take out the summing. Click OK, because I don't want to sum. Because if you want to see the full budget code, you cannot have any summing in your scope. All right, there's only 2 budget items. But you can see the working 285,714 was budgeted, and that got copied into the model. The same for this one. So for both the employees and your financials, your starting point is what's in your working and your employees as of right now, today. If you look down here, remember we talked about this will tell you the date. Mine says 12/5 because I did it yesterday. But yours should say 12/6 in today's date, because that was the last time the financials, the working budget, was reloaded. Is all of this making sense? Please let me know if not, because it's super important to understand where these numbers originally come from. It's really just your working, that you're going to start with your working, and then you're going to build next year's budget off of your working. again, we talked about this yesterday. If your working changes and you need to bring those changes into ESP, you can go to Tools, Financials, Reload Adopted Working Budget. So if you need to reload for some reason, and this is not employees, this is only the budget, the working and adopted budgets. Employees are separate. And you also have, if you need to show your adopted column, which we haven't talked about how to add columns. Let's say I want to show the, let me clear my, this is the Delta column that I added a few minutes ago. I don't want it anymore. I want to put my working back over here. I can manually move them. I can right click and hide that if I want to, or you can always click, we did it yesterday, this reset column layout. That will put my columns back to my default layout. Let's say I want to put my adopted column in here, because I don't know if my adopted and working are identical or not. So you can either right click on the left side of this column or the right side of this column. Depends on where you want the new column to appear. I want the new column to appear on the left side of my working. We have a lot of tooltips that pop up. They're kind of annoying sometimes, I know. But I want my adopted to show up here. So I'm going to right click, and then you'll get this, we call it the context menu. Now, the first thing you have to ask yourself is, remember yesterday we talked about data sets, and where is the adopted, what data set does it live in? And we know it's not in the model, it's in the Infinite Visions data set, or the Business Plus data set. It's a blue column. Remember, these are going to be blue, the model is going to be green, and the actuals will be purple. I want the blue adopted. So you go to that data set, go over here and find adopted, and just click it, and notice it added to the left side of the working. And I'm going to open my scope back up because I just want to compare the adopted and the working and see if there have been any actual changes. So I don't care what fund, actually I'm going to move my object to the top. I'm going to sum under, so I don't care about breaking out by any of these elements. And I'm also going to add fund balance and revenue. So this scope will give me every single object. This scope will give me every single object, an object only. I won't be broken out by any other element. Natalie, did you start TeamViewer by chance? Scott's ready to help you. Natalie, are you still with us? Okay. So let me reset my light. Oh, dang, I did not mean to do that. Sometimes you click on a button, you didn't mean to do it. Right click, adopted. Okay, so there is a big difference between what was published and where they're currently sitting in the working scenario. And the reason why the numbers are much lower is because we have revenue showing in here now. I would have expected that to be 0. But I think they did have some issues at the end of their budgeting cycle, and they had to make some changes to the actual spreadsheet of their adopted. So the one that's here might not be the one that was actually published. But hopefully for you guys, most of you guys, this number is, this field is empty, because this will be a summation of all of your expenses and your revenue and fund balance, which should equal to 0. And you're working too. Any questions so far, guys? I hope this is making sense. It's pretty easy on the financials. It's just your starting point. But remember, this is your starting point for your working as your starting point for everything but your salaries, your actual FTE, because those roll up from the employees. Notice that, let me go back down to these budget items here, these non-salary budget items like postage, it's in the fixed amount column. It's not calculated column to get to the final amount column. Whereas the employees, they live in, actually there's other columns, but we don't show them by default. But these are calculated, means ESP is calculating these based on the roll up from the employees, and there's no fixed amounts. These are strictly being calculated by ESP from the employees. However, 0116 supplemental retirement stipend, it is a salary, but see how, notice that the icon is gray. That means it's a salary, but it's lump sum budgeted on the financials. But we have to mark it as a salary. ESP has to know it's a salary so that payroll cost down here, per Social Security, workers' comp, can be taken out of it. If you notice, substitutes is a good example. Substitutes. Well, actually, they use, I believe they use the employees to calculate substitutes. But here's one, classified subs, 0135. This is lump sum budgeted on the financials. So there's two types of salaries, one that rolls up from the employees and one that is just lump sum budgeted. It's not tied to actual employees or FTE, but it is still a salary. So that means payroll costs need to be calculated on them. Questions? So here's a good example, 0324. The number here is 563,444. In the workings, 563,444, but the adopted was 561,309. So we do have an option. Every district, I believe, copies the working, but you do always have the option of copying the adopted into the model to be your starting point. But I think every district uses the working as their starting point. And this is always a nice way when you have it by object, just to see, just to get a feel for the overall health of your budget. And I'm sure a lot of times people probably don't want, they just want Fund 100. So even if an element is in the summing, you can still use a element number to filter it down. So even though I'm not looking at this by fund, I'm looking at it only by object, it's still being limited to just Fund 100. So again, I will, and I'm sure it'll happen this year, call saying, Tim, where is this function, or where is this, I'm missing some dollars. And the first thing I look at is people's scope. Because it's easy to not realize that you're actually, especially when you start putting in values and trying to trim your scope down, to miss one. All right, it's 2:02. Let's just take a quick 1-2 minute break, and we'll just get right back to this in just a second. Oh, all right. Let's see. Does anyone have any questions about the financials? Because once we get to the employees, it's a lot more complicated, and similar concepts about using the actuals being copied into the model, but a lot more complicated. This is where you will go when you're ready to start changing these budget items, and we'll do that probably starting tomorrow, how to use the new amount and variance columns to start adjusting these values. It's pretty straightforward for all of these type of budget items, the non-FTE stuff. And, you know, these are all calculated numbers based on all of these payroll costs, based on like Social Security, that's based on 7.65% of pretty much all of the salaries. And there could be a time where at the end of the year or before you're ready to print, you need that to be 50,000 more. You can change that here if you need to. So every number can be adjusted. But it's just a little more complicated when you want to change a number that we're already calculating. You want to override it, it gets into a whole override situation. So we're still in the New Year scenario. Let's go to the Employees tab. And one of the big things, we kind of talked about it yesterday, one of the big things of a New Year scenario is squaring away your employees. One second, guys, one second. Because whenever we do, whenever the audit runs, we're going to find, and I think we saw this yesterday, a lot of employees that are over 1.0 FTE. They don't have a salary plan. They don't have a benefit plan, something, because every new year it happens. So here's all of the employees. And let me collapse this one level. So this is probably something that's, I can already tell that's wrong. Somebody is coded to 0232. Right, ESP doesn't know, it just knows, it just brings in whatever's in Visions or Business Plus, it brings it in and sticks it in here. But more than likely, these are the kind of things that you're going to see and have to figure out with HR. So this would be a good example of right-click, Infinite Vision details. Because remember, this is a snapshot as of yesterday at 3:45 p.m. when I created this. So yeah, for some reason, they've got his position coded to 0232, which is unemployment, right? So, you know, these are the kind of things that you're going to stumble across that need to be resolved. And there's two ways to resolve them. One is, and probably the better way for some of this stuff, is let HR know about this, let them fix it, and then you have to reload your employees. And remember, you cannot reload just one employee. You have to reload all the employees. We don't have a way of doing just one employee because he probably needs to be fixed anyway. I guess, I'm not really sure, but I would imagine HR would like to know that this is probably coded wrong. Does anybody have any excuse why this might be right? I don't know, honestly. I've never seen it. So, this might be where you would want to do a save to spreadsheet here. And then you can email HR and, just to let them know, what it's showing. So it just dumps it out into the Excel spreadsheet. Because, this isn't right. It's not going to roll into the, I'm not even sure if it won't even roll into the financials. 0232. Yeah, see, there's no FTE here. So, because ESP doesn't even see that as a salary account. So his numbers, his dollars are not even in the budget right now because they're coded wrong. So that needs to be fixed. Another way that I like to look at my employees, especially for a new year, is I don't want it broken out by their object right now. I just want a long alphabetical list of every employee. And the way to do that is you go to your scope and you just sum to the very top. So now we're not going to be broken out by any element at all. This will just give you one long list of everybody. And it makes kind of looking for problems a little bit easier, especially for the split funded people. All right. Real quick, one thing that we've noticed that we said yesterday was this up and down green arrow. Does anybody remember what that means? All right. That means that we annualized the employees. We moved their work days. Remember, we checked that checkbox on create scenario, which moves everybody's days to match the work calendar days. So that looked like there were quite a few. You can see every one that has the green arrow was a mid-year hire. Started sometime this year. And now we want to make sure we budget for the full days for their position next year. So another big problem that I see is FTE. So I'm going to sort on this FTE total column and see if there's anybody over one FTE. So I left click on it just to select it. And then I want descending. So it'll put the highest numbers first. So we can see Laura Goodrick. This is probably a case, especially when it's 2.0, of she moved and positions, and the old one probably wasn't closed. You can see she has the same, well, no, the function is different and the area is different. So this is a good case where you would right click, look at the details. So she was a secretary, then a registrar, and one of these is probably needs to be closed. Or it could be that she's a segmented employee where she's going to work in this one part of the year. So here's the deal with this one. She worked from August 10th to 11/2 in one position, and then she switched on November 3rd to this position. So you have to find out, is this going to happen again next year, or is she going to be in this new position full time next year? But both positions are open. And so ESP sees 8 hours because all it takes is 8 hours to be 1.0 FTE. And that's why, here's the hours. That's why it's showing up in ESP as a FTE of 2. She has 2 1.0 FTE positions. So just another case of checking with HR and seeing, is she going to be in her new position, or is she going to be segmented like this, or what exactly is going to be? More than likely, she moved to a new position and the old one just wasn't closed. So again, they can fix that in HR. And if there's a bunch to fix, have them fix a bunch. And then when you're ready to reload, you go to Tools, Employees, Reload Employees. If I'm going too fast, guys, please let me know. But I'm hoping this is making some sense. And you have a lot of options here. The only thing you're really concerned with is, again, making sure the database is correct, which it is, the default. And this is the one that you probably want to use as of for right now. This is what happened when we created the new year. After you do the reload, go ahead and copy it to the model. So basically, it's almost like rebuilding the new year for you, but only the employees. It's going to go to Visions or Business Plus, reload the employees only into the blue columns, which I don't have showing right now. Let me reset my layout. It will reload the employees into the blue columns and then copy them fresh into the model. And this is assuming you haven't done any work yet in the model, because if you have, if you've moved people around, you would lose all of that because it's going to refresh everyone. Or if you don't want to reload, if it's just maybe one employee, like Laura, that we just talked about, and they said, oh yeah, her 60-day one is not going to be there next year. It's just going to be her new position. You could just right click and inactivate her. And that takes her out after you save it. That takes her out, that funding out of the budget, and she will be just 1.0. So some you can just fix in ESP if you want to. Or you can work with HR, have them fix the employees, and then reload the employees and copy them into the model. It's up to you how you want to do it, but you do want all of these discrepancies fixed before you really start working on the budget.
I'm just listening to the It's fine.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay, real quick. So I have a council. on the
Beth,
phone.
could you mute your microphone, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. So I right-clicked and activate her. I don't want to save it yet, so I just clicked refresh. And that gets rid of any changes that I made. So guys, come on, any questions? There's got to be some questions about this, because this is really important to understand about the employees and their starting point.
Yeah, for me, Tim, it's making sense, but there's just a lot of information.
Yeah.
And so I probably will, well, I know I will, I'll rewatch these videos and probably send you offline specific questions as I'm
Sure.
introduced through your presentations, and then have an opportunity to go back and just watch these videos again.
Right. Yeah, oh no, I expect plenty of questions, especially from the new people. That's fine. And, I know we're spending a lot of time overview, but I think understanding, from what I have found, is that understanding where these values are coming from and why numbers are the way they are, it's really probably the keystone to understanding how ESP works and why numbers are the way they are. So I know we've spent a lot of time just talking about how it works, and we'll get to probably tomorrow about actually making changes and playing with it. but having a good understanding of why these numbers are here to begin with really helps moving
Hey,
forward.
This
Yep.
is Jane. I was in another meeting, so I was just able to join, so I am lost. So, the recording, how do we get access to those so I could go back and watch this one?
I'll send a link out.
Okay, perfect.
They'll be up on YouTube.
And I emailed, I am having trouble accessing ESP. So maybe I could work with you later.
Yeah,
Perfect, thank
I'll
you.
get, so you're not even in ESP at all? Is that
Right, right.
okay? Let me see if I can get Scott to help you. What is your phone number?
541,
541
yep, 979
979
6009.
6009. Okay, I'll get Scott to reach out to you in a few minutes.
Thank you.
And notice that this is something we've added so you can see what the funding is. This one is just your regular roll up single funding. These are supplemental, which we haven't talked about supplemental yet. But this is just a supplemental pay. Notice it doesn't have work days, work hours, any of that stuff. But there is a total wage. And we'll talk about supplemental in a little bit. Excuse me. Jane, can you still hear me?
Yes,
If you go to an email from me or Scott, well, actually, Scott's going to call you. I'm sorry,
Okay.
Scott's going to give you a call.
thank you.
Yep, no problem. So, so right now, everything that we see in the blue should match hang on, let me add the actuals. Infinite Visions Daily, add common. So remember the blue as of yesterday at 3:45, and the purple is as of 1:30 in the morning. But actually, my test database doesn't update. But for you guys, these should pretty much match. Well, they should match because you just did it right now. So your actuals, actually, it might not match because your actuals were as of 3 o'clock in the morning, and your blue is as of 30 minutes ago, an hour ago. So if any changes have been made between when the actuals were loaded to when you manually reloaded the blue, you might have some differences. But tomorrow the actuals are going to change. The next day the actuals are going to change. Tomorrow Dennis Greason, this line here, his actuals might be empty if he gets let go today. If he retires today or quits today and he gets taken out of HR, when these actuals load tonight, this line will be empty in the actuals, just the actuals. He'll still have values here because these don't change unless you manually reload, and he'll still have actuals in the model. So then you'll have to figure out, hey, what happened to Dennis? And you won't know that this is empty unless you add the actuals and actually look at it. So, this is, it's with the employees, it's constantly a moving target if you're using the actuals. because, and then tomorrow you might have somebody like this person. I don't know what happened exactly here, but a name will show up with a line through it and grayed out, and that means they've been hired. Because this one they have actual values but no current values. So between when this was created and the actuals, but actually mine are backwards because I haven't loaded. But anyway, you'll see the same thing where a new employee comes in and they'll have actual values, but they won't have current values or model values. But their name will show up in the list. And then again, you'll have to decide, do I need to bring them into the model? Are they going to be here next year? Are they a replacement for somebody? You know, I don't know how you figure that out. I guess you ask HR. I don't know if you get like actual reports that say who's gone and who's new. I don't know, to be honest with you. But that's going to be part of, that's why the employees are kind of messy. You know, at first, just getting them cleaned up and getting the employees in the model that you expect to be there next year so that you're budgeting the correct dollars and in the right account codes for next year. So as of right now, everything is going to match, but as time marches on, your actuals will stray a little bit from what is being actually in the model. Any questions, guys, about that? Am I explaining it correctly? And, you know, I've had this happen before. Some people say, hey, my numbers changed overnight. So we never copy anything into the model unless you specifically say, you know, like when you reload the employees, you have to click a checkbox and say copy to model. And then it will even ask you, are you sure you want to copy to the model because you're going to overwrite something? So just because the actuals run at night, nothing will change in your model. Only the purple columns themselves will change. The blue will not change and the green columns will not change. You have to specifically copy it into the model. And don't forget, if Katie is somebody that you want in the model, you can always right click on her and just say copy funding from actuals. If you reload the employees and she was in the blue and you wanted to bring her in, you could also say right click, copy from Infinite Visions or the blue columns. So you have two options, either copy from the actuals or copy from the current, the blue columns. And that's just one individual, or you can select multiple individuals to do that. When you copy an employee over, we don't automatically, I'm trying to remember, but I don't think we give you the option of, or maybe we do, of annualizing. Let me try it. I think it will just copy. Yeah, if you do this kind of copy, it will not annualize them. So if it's a mid-year hire, and if it's only one employee, then after you copy them, then you can go into their work days and adjust their work days accordingly to the full year. Or we have, if you go up here and look at this toolbar button, these two buttons are really important and we need to talk about these. So when you make changes to the employees, or the salary plans, or you move employees, or you change their work days, that does not automatically just get rolled over into the financials. If you go to the salary plans and give them a COLA or steps, Just saving does not apply those COLA and steps to the employees. You have to do what's called recalculate. And the reason why is because it takes 30 seconds to a minute, because I mentioned earlier, what we do is we take all of the employees, we preserve their loaded data, the data that they brought in from your ERP. We always, when we recalculate, we bring all the employees back to what they were loaded. Sorry, my mom just walked. Back to what they were loaded, and then you recalculate, and it goes through and applies all of the factors to the employees. And you recalculate by this button right here, or when you make a change. Let me go to the salary plans for a second. And let's say you want to add stepping. And we'll go over all of this stepping and COLAs a little bit later, but I just want to demonstrate something right now. So when you click save, you have the options to recalculate here as well. So if you were doing stepping like this, you would want to put your note in. And if you just recalculate the employees, it would apply the COLA. I canceled that. It would apply the COLA, I'm sorry, the stepping, but only to the employees tab. I don't want to save that. So it would apply that stepping just to the employees tab, but it would not be in the financials because we did not recalculate the financials. We'll probably get into a point where we're going to combine the financials and the employees, where it's just one recalc, so that it's a little bit faster. But always remember, and look over here, we talked about a flag yesterday. You have a flag. Red means you are not recalculated. So before you go to your financials, that means you've made a change that has affected the numbers, but you have not recalculated yet. So you cannot be sure that your totals are correct. So I've gotten to the point where, because it's gotten so much faster, I just, instead of recalculating the employees, I do a recalc scenario, and you can include the employees in it. But if you want to annualize the employees, the only way to do that is to recalculate the employees alone, and you have an annualize. Maybe we should include that in the other recalc. But if you need to annualize all of your employees, and you really only need to do that probably once in the beginning, or after you reload your employees and copy them into your model, you'll need to do this. Because after you've done it, then it's only going to be the new people that you bring in that you want to annualize. And you can just, hopefully at that point, you're just doing them individually at that point. You can just change their work days manually. It's a little bit quicker. But one of the benefits of the recalc is, I'm going to recalc just to show you what it does, is it does all of those audits that we've been talking about. So I clicked recalculate scenario, and I clicked recalculate the employee. So this is going to give me a green flag because it's going to recalculate everything. The process log shows up. And you can see it's doing a lot of math behind the scenes on the database. Any questions while this is running? This used to take up to 5 or 6 minutes for some districts, but we've worked really hard to get it down, try to get it down at least to under 1.5 to 2 minutes for everyone. But it's crunching a lot of numbers. It goes back, it brings everybody back to their loaded values, it resteps them, it reapplies the COLAs, it reapplies any inflation rates, it checks their benefit plans, it checks their salary plans. And it does these action items that's the whole point of me running this really, is I want to show you the action items from the audits. Okay, not too bad. So if you guys recalculate, you might have a lot. Hopefully you don't have too many action items. It takes a second to refresh too. Okay. So here's the process log with the action items. And here's actually that we saw this earlier. The person, it looks for anybody over 1.0 FTE, and it just brings it to your attention. And here's another person that's over 1.0 FTE. Here is, here's that person that is coded to 0232. It's called a non-employee roll-up, but it has a salary in it. So that needs to be addressed. And then this is the same one. There's a person FTE in 0232 and they have benefits. Normally you don't have benefits assigned to 0232. So if you fix one, it will fix both of these errors. Or not, they're not errors, they're action items. Now, it could be that these are correct. Okay, so you just kind of have to live with them. ESP is going to point them out, but they're always going to be here. But normally that's not the case. Most of these will get addressed, should be addressed. And there's actually quite a few other ones too, but this is pretty clean. Reynolds is pretty clean as far as their employees go, so that's good. So Darren, you might need to check with HR about Samuel Heiser. And why?
And I did, when you were talking about that, Tim, I did a screenshot, sent it off to them.
Okay.
And
then
yeah, they basically don't know.
They don't.
Put it
Yeah.
back in my lap. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They don't know. Okay. Well. All right. So I don't know. That's for you guys to figure out. I can't help you. And then same with Goodrick and Massa. With probably two account codes, one not closed, I would imagine. That's normally what causes the over one FTE is an account not being closed.
And with Massa,
yeah.
looking at those account codes, so we have these COVID dollars, right? And this person, in terms of a substitute teacher, that's why I recognize that name. For whatever reason she's gone, we've had a substitute teacher and we pay them out of those COVID funds.
Okay.
So my guess, but I have to confirm with Anthony, is that it's accurate, but that's why there's two codes.
Right, but 0111 that's okay, but that's like license, right? That's not substitute.
True.
So that's why if they're substitutes, yeah, I don't know, check and see.
Yeah, I will.
And remember, you know, the ultimate goal is to find out, well, what's it going to be next year? Is there going to be a new teacher to replace, you know, an actual 0111 FTE in there? Right? Because I mean, you always want to look forward to next year. How do we want to budget? Where do these dollars need to be budgeted next year? Because that's all you really care about is where do you want this salary to be coded to?
Okay.
For next year. All right. Okay, I guess we can let's start talking about these columns. Any more questions right now, guys? Please, anything? No? All right.
I was just wondering, in the benefits column, why are they different colors of green?
Because these are the administrators usually, and they are lumps. They have their own plans sometimes where you manually enter. It's not something we calculate.
Okay, okay,
And so you
gotcha.
can manually change them. So yeah, benefit plan administrator. A lot of times they have their own benefit plan. And because if it was a common benefit plan, like for the others, like the license or classified, you can put in a number and it gives that same number to everybody. But a lot of times
Right.
administrators have their own.
Okay.
So you can set it to override on the assumptions. We haven't talked about that yet. And then that allows you to manually change the numbers here. If you notice, that's light green with a blue
Right.
box, you can change it, but this one is red, you cannot change it.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep. And generally we try to, if it's calculated, we italicize it, but I noticed that that's italicized too. So I'm not 100% sure about the italicization, but okay. So the default column layout here, and also another thing that we will talk about tomorrow, maybe, or Thursday, is if you set up your columns a certain way that you really like, you can, this toolbar right here is called the Save Grid View. You can set it up and then you can save it. You add it. You can call it Tim's view or your view or budgeted positions or whatever you want to call it. And you can even include the scope. If you want to include the scope, you have a lot of options here. And you can make it public to share with other people in your district if you want, or if you don't, you just keep it to yourself. And then you'll have it available in this list. And we have some here by default that we include. And some of these might be saved by other people at Reynolds. That you can quickly get to a layout, a saved grid view layout that you really like. Because there might be a time where you get all of your columns set a certain way, you really like it. Because there's a lot of columns, everybody, especially for the employees. If you right click, watch my screen, if you right click, you have your 3 data sets, and within each data set, you've got, gosh, I don't even know how many, few hundred, maybe, different columns that you can add. You won't need most of them, but it's good to know about them, that they are there. And we'll go over some of these in a little bit when we talk about these columns here. But anyway, you might add a bunch of these columns, and you might want to make sure you save it as a grid view and that you can get back to it quickly. Because if you reset your layout here, they're gone. The layout is gone unless you have saved it. It'll put it back to how you like it. Now, if you do, when you close ESP and open it, it should always return exactly where you left off. The same tab, the same grid layout, everything. So it will be there opening and closing ESP. But once you reset it, reset your layout, or if you move things around, it's gone unless you've saved it as a grid view. So we'll go over that a little bit more tomorrow, but it's pretty simple. Okay, so let's just talk about employees for a second. We'll find just one. Okay, Audrey Guess here. So this is the account code that she came in from Infinite Visions with. So she's currently, all her dollars, her salary dollars will go to 0112, this account code on the employees tab, on the financials tab. Her work days, which should hopefully match the work days of the work calendar that she's attached to. And I think, let me check and do an Infinite Vision details here. I think it might tell us the work calendar that they are assigned to. So there's her position. There's the account code. A little bit more information, her job family. So there's the position ID. Years of experience. Now the schedule, that is the salary schedule that she is assigned to. And notice that it has her on 8, schedule 8. Sorry, schedule 8, row 10, column 4. But in ESP, we switch row and column, so she's on 8, 4, 10. And when we switch to the employees tab, this will make more sense. But this is where this number comes from, and this controls her annual rate right here. This comes from the salary plan that she's attached to, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But I was seeing if her, so it could be that Reynolds uses position. So this is a position that would be in Infinite Visions, and it would define the number of work days that she would be working. So there's the contract, work days contract, 260. So if she was a mid-year hire and you annualized her, that's why she would get set to 260. And again, the days are important because we are going to take her salary plan. Let's go ahead and look at the salary plans. Oh, so she's on 8, 4, 10. I need to remember that. Refresh this. It still remembers my change from a while ago. So here's 8, 4, 10. So it came in, and this works the same way as the financials. We pull in your salary plans and then copy them into the model. So the salary plans live in your ERP system, and then they get copied into the model. And they also have a work days and work hours associated with them. And for these for these annual plans, such as classified, this annualized classified schedule, we take the annual rate, right? This is the negotiated rate that that's negotiated, right? This is the annual rate for this step. And we divide it by 260 by 8 to get this hourly rate, 23,820. So anybody that's on this plan 8, grade 4, step 10 will get 23.82 an hour. That's why it's so important that these days are right, because it's going to take 23.84 times 260 times 8 to get to 49,546. That is how the annual rate is calculated. This is their base salary, or different districts have different names, but this is their main salary for their main funding that comes from the salary plans tab. So it's important to understand that the whole purpose of the salary plan tab here is to break these rates down to the hourly rate. And there's some, I don't know if there's any here, some districts, they're already an hourly rate. We pull in the hourly rate. And there's actually none here because they would have a different symbol here. So it doesn't look like Reynolds has any, but you guys might. And then we don't touch the hourly rate because it's already brought in as an hourly rate versus having to figure out the hourly rate. So generally, you won't be changing these. You can if you need to, but normally the way these are changed are by COLAs. When it's time to add a COLA, if you notice you have a COLA column here, and the way to add COLAs and steps is you do it normally because it's done at the plan level. right? You have a tree of plans and grades and steps, but normally every step on this plan will get the same COLA. So if you're at the plan level here, you just go to the COLA box and add, you just put in 5. One thing to know about ESP is if the descriptor for the column or wherever you're going to enter the number already has a percent in it, then you just enter it as a percent. You don't have to put in 0.05, or you don't even have to put in the percent symbol. So just that, since there's already a percent symbol there, just putting the 5 in is 5%. You press enter, and it cascaded that 5% down to every step, every grade and step, but only in Plan 8, right? Because I put it at, let me collapse this up. See, only Plan 8 is getting 5%. And then notice the pencils, and this went highlight up here, so I have to save it. Put in my note, adding COLAs. And it's always a good idea to go ahead and recalculate the employees. Now, I'm not going to look at the financials yet, so I'm not going to worry about recalculating the scenario, right? Because I'm only going to stay in the employees. I'm not going to go look at it on the financials yet. So I don't need to spend the extra 30 seconds to a minute to recalculate the scenario. You can if you want to. It doesn't hurt anything. Click apply. Now, all it's really doing is it's just going to add 5% to the annual rate, which in turn will add 5% to the hourly rate, which in turn will add 5% to her rate. Process log is running over here. And this is where I was saying where it's good that ESP takes it back to the beginning, because then if you wanted to change the 5%, you have to leave the 5% in, right? But if you wanted to change it to 4%, you just change that to a 4. It does not, it's almost, like an Excel spreadsheet. When you make a change, it's stuck in there. You have to manually back things out. Here, you could just change that back to 0 and get rid of the COLA if you wanted to, or change it to another number. The 5% is not stuck in there. It's just applied every time you recalculate the scenario. So then if we look at, here's step 10. Here was her original annual rate. So it went from 59,426 in vision. So this year she's getting 59,426. Next year she's getting 62,397. And I'm going to add a delta column. If you right click between 2 columns, you can go down to calculated and do a delta value %. And this is the name of the column. I'll just say okay. So you can see it went up 2971, which is exactly a 5% increase. So COLAs are pretty simple. It's real simple math. And then if we go look at her on the employees, we should see this annual rate change. After the refresh. Yes, yep, 52,023. So she now has a COLA in her. Anybody actually on Plan 8 has a 5% COLA. Has gone up by 5%. You could always go, because you have their annual rate here, you could drag this over. Oh, too far. just do a quick delta. You can see that a lot of these, everybody that's on plan 8, their annual rate went up. These symbols here, these are the stepping symbols. The reason why Audrey, who we've been working on here, that means she's at max step, right? It's like an arrow that hit the ceiling. Because if you remember, she is on 8-4-10, and 10 is the maximum step. So we cannot step her any further. Even when we click steps, she cannot step anymore. 10 is the maximum. Speaking of steps, it's done pretty much the exact same way that COLAs are done. You do it at the plan level, but instead of typing anything in, all you do is click a box. And then you save it. Quick note, recalculate. I'm going to go ahead and recalculate the scenario too. And if you guys are in your New Year's, if it's created, feel free to, follow along and try the same thing on your people. If I'm going too fast, please let me know. You should get a bell, but if you're on Citrix, you might not get the bell. I don't know if they allow the bell sounds to pass through to your computer. I'm running mine locally. That's why I hear the bell, but you guys might not hear the bell. That's just a Citrix IT thing. Now, I want you to watch these people on plan 8. They're going to have a little up arrow. So John here, he has the up. If you click on it, you can change their salary plan. That's why you have to be careful about clicking in there. But he has the purple. Anytime you see purple in ESP, that means it's something that is new to this scenario, right? So this step is a new step. It's been added this scenario or this fiscal year. So you know that this step is as of this fiscal year. And if we look over here, we can grab the plan codes, move them to the left of the model plan codes. Did I lose them? Where'd they go? There's a lot of columns, I know. There it is, okay. Oops, sorry. So this is where Kelly Guzman came in on plan 8, grade 2, step 6, and now in ESP, she is on step 7. So not only did they get a COLA, they also now have a step as well. So you see, as far as stepping and COLAs, that's the easiest thing to do in ESP. Okay, 2 minutes left. Tomorrow I'm going to show you guys how to do a baseline. so that when you do stepping and COLAs, you can see the cost of that, what it's going to cost the district to do a certain COLA. That gets used quite often, I believe. But you can see this this delta column that I added, right? It was showing, this wasn't there. Let me move that out of the way. It was telling me the difference of where they were loaded versus after the COLAs and steps. So that 5% COLA and stepping everybody on plan 8 is 3.9 million, but that's just in annual salary. That doesn't include any payroll cost. And we'll talk about the rest of these columns tomorrow, because this is the cost total column, which includes their annual rate plus any supplemental pay, plus all their payroll cost, plus their medical benefits to get to the final cost total. So it's 3.9 in salaries, but it's going to be 4.5 or more in total cost, because you're going to have to include all of their payroll costs that are associated with this salary cost. And we'll talk more about these columns tomorrow, because you got to understand how they flow from left to right. Any questions about the COLAs or stepping or anything? Okay, well, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email or let me know and we can talk. You have a New Year scenario there now. Feel free to play around in it. And don't worry about breaking it, because we're going to, at the end of training, we're going to delete it. And then I'll help you guys create a new permanent New Year scenario if you need help with that. But this is just going to be our sandbox for right now. And it's good to be in the current year. Easier to understand what we're seeing. Okay, if nobody has anything, we'll talk tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Take care.
Thank
All right,
you.
thank you.
You're welcome.